Revenge with Karen. The first time Camille realized her job was a lie, she was staring at a Slack thread where a junior engineer, who once thought JSON was a wrapper, had resolved her HIPAA escalation with a thumbs-up emoji. The flagged issue? Unencrypted patient data being routed through a third-party analytics plugin named Sniffly. Real subtle. She stared at the screen, blinked twice, then minimized the window like it was porn she didn't mean to click. It was 3 months before they called her redundant, back when she still thought being the most competent person in the room counted for something. Camille wasn't flashy. She didn't yell. She didn't posture. She wore the same black flats until they curled like stale bread. But she knew every inch of that company's cloud stack like it was her third kidney. 6 years in cloud compliance had carved her into a ghost with root access, quiet, omnipresent, invisible unless something broke. And things always broke. But when the company announced they were pivoting into healthcare SaaS, with no new hires in compliance, something inside her tilted. Their security posture was already duct taped together with Jira tickets and crossed fingers. Adding protected health data to that mess, that was like serving raw chicken and calling it keto. Camille raised the alarm, nicely at first. She dropped detailed reports in the exec channel, articles, provided spreadsheets. One VP replied, "Let's circle back after beta." Another said, "Great points. Can you just focus on provisioning roles for now?" That one stung. She built the provisioning framework, alone over 2 Christmases, while her sister texted pictures of rum balls and she munched cold ravioli over a VPN. Most days, Camille swallowed her rage like a vitamin. But there were moments, quiet moments, where it pooled in her throat, like when the CTO mispronounced encryption during an all-hands, and no one corrected him. Or when she found out they'd assigned HIPAA documentation duties to a summer intern who once Googled, "Is HIPAA a guy or a law?" And hey, speaking of things people overlook, 97% of you are listening to these stories without hitting that little subscribe button. Go on, tap it. Maybe even smash that like. Takes 2 seconds and fuels the caffeine-addled gremlins who help make this madness happen. You help, we suffer less. It's a symbiosis. Anyway, back to Camille. She kept records. Not out of spite, at least not at first, but because nobody else was looking. Screenshots, log summaries, exported Slack threads. She knew they were skating the edge of legality, and one bad audit could spin the whole place into a compliance blender. She told herself she'd quit eventually. Even bookmarked job boards, flirted with recruiters, drafted half a resignation email once, but never sent it. She was scared and tired, and despite it all, she cared about the data, about the people behind it. That was her fatal flaw. Until that Thursday morning when a calendar invite popped up like a guillotine. Team realignment mandatory, attendance 8:00 a.m. No agenda, no warning. Just her, a gray HR avatar, a legal rep whose expression looked like she'd just smelled burnt toast. Camille didn't cry, didn't argue, just nodded, took notes. And when they said, "Your role has been made redundant," she clicked end meeting and sat still for 12 full seconds. Then she closed her laptop, took a long sip of coffee, and whispered, "Well, time to find the matches." The screen blinked once, twice, then settled into the sterile blue and white misery of a Zoom window. Camille's name hung in the corner like a chalk outline. HR was already there, Dana, the one who used emojis in layoff emails. Legal joined next, a woman with a voice like bubble wrap being popped underwater. And last came Mark, her direct manager, who once referred to her work as that back-end fluff. "Hi, Camille," Dana chirped, like this was a catch-up call and not a corporate hit job. "Thanks for making time on short notice." Camille already knew. Don't need a sixth sense to smell blood in a room where no one meets your eyes. Mark was pretending to review something on his second monitor, probably the Spotify tab he forgot to mute. "We've been reviewing team alignment as we evolve our business priorities." Legal began, reading from the same dead-eyed playbook they used for mass layoffs and PR disasters. "And unfortunately, your role is no longer aligned with the company's strategic direction." Not you, not your work, just your role. Like she was an empty chair someone tripped over during a budget meeting. Camille tilted her head slightly, like a cat watching a ceiling fan. "So that's it." Effective immediately, Dana added, smiling like a flight attendant explaining turbulence. "We'll be deactivating your credentials within the hour. You'll receive an exit packet via DocuSign. And again, we are so grateful for everything you've contributed." Legal smiled. Mark nodded like a man trying to look somber at a funeral he secretly scheduled. "Any questions?" Dana asked. Camille gave a slow blink. Just one? They perked up. She smiled. Would you like the printer access code back, or should I keep that as a parting gift? Mark finally looked at her. Camille, let's keep this professional. Of course, she said, already moving to log out. Wouldn't want to violate company culture. She closed the call. No fanfare. Oh, goodbye Slack message. Her phone buzzed immediately, access revoked. Email gone, credentials wiped, like she'd never existed, except her laptop hadn't just been a work machine, it was a trigger, a decoy. Months ago, Camille, burnt out, undervalued, and borderline prophetic, had written a little something she called the cleanup script. Just a few lines, nothing destructive, nothing traceable, just clarifying. At 8:04 a.m., it ran on autopilot, silent curtain draw. The root credential metadata quietly blinked into obfuscation mode. Audit logs shifted into background retention states. One compliance API endpoint, just one, flagged itself as temporarily unreachable due to unusual traffic. The cloud didn't burn, it misted, and only someone like Camille would even notice. But Camille wasn't there anymore. She stood up, slipped on her coat, and walked out of the apartment. Morning air slapped her like an accusation. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she walked to the corner cafe, ordered a black coffee, and sat down hard on a splintered bench outside. No one noticed her. Just another woman with a laptop bag and a caffeine habit. She sipped slowly, each swallow chasing away the freeze that had started in her chest. Redundant, she muttered, like hell. The walk turned into a mile, then two. Camille drifted through the neighborhood like a ghost with a grudge, sipping lukewarm coffee, and replaying the slow-motion betrayal in her head. Not just the Zoom call, that had all the warmth of a tax audit, but the years of smiling indifference. Every time she flagged a risk and got back a thanks, we'll keep this in mind. Every manager who nodded thoughtfully then assigned the task to someone louder and dumber. Every Slack reply that started with actually and ended with her doing twice the work for half the credit. There was one ticket, one she remembered too clearly, where she'd warned that the new S3 policy exposed PHI logs without proper encryption. The engineer closed it with lol fixed and tagged her in a gif of someone taping a banana to a wall. Leadership called him a culture fit. Camille called him a future liability. She turned down a quieter street. Houses were all new builds, cookie-cutter and sterile. Kind of like the HR scripts she'd just endured. She stopped walking when the sidewalk buckled around a tree root and sat down on a cold stone planter. They thought she'd disappear, that she'd nod, sign the NDA, and go gentle into the LinkedIn night. Camille took out her phone, not the company one. Her phone. A separate digital ecosystem, encrypted, off-cloud, compartmentalized, built during insomnia spells, and fueled by paranoia no one ever took seriously. She opened her Secure Notes app and started a checklist titled, Things They Forgot I Still Have. Old staging access key with expired rotation, but active read perms, encrypted backups from Q4 vulnerability audit, stored locally. PDF of the original HIPAA onboarding draft. The redline comments removed before final approval copy of the internal memo where legal wrote, as long as it's not discoverable. Screenshot of a Slack DM. No need to document that route, Camille. It's too complicated anyway. That last one. Sent by the same engineer who later claimed he'd designed the compliance framework. The one Camille built from scratch during her third year while recovering from bronchitis and running reports from bed. She scrolled deeper. Her private audit folder was still synced to her personal drive, harmless in isolation, damning when paired with what she knew was missing from the company's Git. That's when the rage sharpened. Not a fire, not yet. More like a needle, stitching together a plan she didn't fully know she was making. Not revenge, not the messy kind. Camille didn't do scorched earth. She preferred mirrors. Let them look at themselves, blinking, wondering how the hell it all got this far. She pulled up the architecture maps she'd saved after working late one night while Mark bragged about shaving compliance overhead. The same night, she built a simple Python script to check for permission drift across cloud roles. They never used it, called it over-engineered, but she kept a version, tweaked it, quietly pointed it at their healthcare staging cluster. It still worked. Her coffee was empty now, cold, bitter. She stood up, pocketed the cup, walked home with her hands clenched just tight enough to crack her knuckles. She wouldn't destroy them. She'd just let them discover what they chose to ignore. Camille sat cross-legged on her living room floor, laptop perched on a crate that still doubled as a coffee table. She hadn't turned on the lights. Let the dim gray spill through the windows. It fit the mood, overcast, like the world had called in sick, but showed up anyway. She exhaled once, slow, and opened her personal secure drive. It asked for her passphrase, then her token, then a biometric prompt from her old phone, a burner she hadn't used in 2 years. That's how careful she'd been. That's how sure she was, even back then, that they'd screw her over eventually. The drive bloomed open. Row after row of neatly labeled folders, each one a little coffin of foresight. /audit snapshots, /legal flubs, /exec Slack exports, /AWS map, full V3 final real if final. She clicked the last one. The architecture diagram loaded, color-coded, time-stamped, annotated like a soldier's war map. Camille had built it in Lucidchart during the holiday freeze while the office bragged about PTO. She'd done it because no one else would, because the idea of HIPAA violations hiding in undocumented subnetworks kept her up at night. And because if shit ever hit the fan, she wanted proof that someone had cared. Then she opened her ticket archive. There it was. Ticket #7837, unencrypted PHI detected in analytics pipeline, staging plus prod flagged, critical status, resolved, no action taken. A line of acid burned through her throat. She read the closing comment. We'll reassess in Q3 after vendor evaluation. Low risk for now. Thanks for surfacing, RD. She remembered RD, Ross Dempsey, product lead, once told her that compliance should serve growth, not throttle it. The man spent 30 minutes once arguing that security tokens were vibe killers. But that wasn't the worst part. She opened a HIPAA readiness document she downloaded during the vendor onboarding last quarter. Name was all over it, lead author, Camille B. Her formatting, her language, even her original appendix structure. But none of the red lines were in place. None of the policy changes she demanded had been implemented. They'd used her name, her credibility, and then wiped the parts where she'd said, "This is not compliant. This will fail an audit. This exposes live PHI with no logging." They hadn't just ignored her. They'd used her as cover. She leaned back on the crate, hands trembling in her lap, not from fear, but from clarity. This wasn't just incompetence. This was the shadow side of startups, the PowerPoint lie, polished and sold to investors while the foundation rotted beneath. Camille had kept that foundation from collapsing quietly, like a janitor sealing cracks no one saw. And now they'd thrown her out the back door like expired toner. Her mind slowed. Her pulse didn't. She started moving. Deliberate now, opening logs, parsing through snapshots, cross-referencing API keys that should have been rotated, checking access control lists, spotting ghost users that still had permission drift across storage buckets labeled things like client fitted to archive to. The deeper she went, the clearer it became. They didn't even know what she was holding. They had no idea how lucky they were that she wasn't cruel. But cruelty wasn't the point. Precision was. Opened a folder labeled /failover sim and clicked the script she'd been polishing in private, originally written to test cloud redundancy under edge case conditions. A personal hobby. But now it was a scalpel. Camille didn't want to hurt them. She wanted them to see themselves, every crack, every oversight, every shortcut they pretended was strategy, and realize just how close they'd danced to disaster. And how only one person had been keeping the lights on. At exactly 8:04 a.m., Camille sat on the edge of her bed, legs dangling over a patch of worn carpet, and hit run. No ceremony, no dramatic countdown, just a single keystroke followed by the faint hum of purpose. The cleanup script wasn't flashy. It didn't explode dashboards or overwrite anything. It wasn't malicious. That would have been too easy and too loud. This wasn't a bomb. It was a slow leak in the hull, somewhere beneath their confidence. It had her fingerprints nowhere on it. Originally, she'd built the tool for legal, a compliance drift monitor designed to quietly flag anomalies in permissions and metadata lineage. The kind of thing that tells you, hey, you forgot to revoke Bob's access after he rage quit and moved to Aruba. This version, modified, subtle, it severed the breadcrumb trail. The audit log pointers leading back to the AWS root key metadata, quietly randomized. Not deleted. Corrupted? Enough to raise questions, not alarms. Enough to send the DevOps team into a fog of terminal scroll and panicked shoulder tapping. 3 key environment variables were flipped into unknown states, just long enough to muddy logs before reverting to their previous values. Camille's version of a fog machine in a security theater no one rehearsed for. The logging engine she once optimized for legal to monitor PHI endpoint hits, now marked those entries as incomplete due to process drift. A real phrase, vague enough to pass first-glance inspection, terrifying enough to trigger review escalation. She leaned back and closed her laptop. No red alerts, no sirens, nothing but the soft whir of a system now pointing at itself with confused fingers. She didn't need to lift a single file or breach any perimeter. The rot was already inside. All she did was let in some light. She left every document intact. Every Slack thread, every half-finished compliance doc, every Git commit from the intern who thought PII stood for Please Ignore Intern. She didn't wipe logs, just made them look like they'd been tampered with. Not enough for certainty, just enough for dread. Because here's the thing, in compliance, certainty is power. But uncertainty, that's a noose, one that tightens on its own the longer it goes unresolved. She walked into the kitchen, poured herself the last of the stale coffee, and stared out the window as the city dragged itself awake. Cars crawled past. A dog barked somewhere. Someone below argued with a parking meter. Camille felt nothing. No euphoria, no vindication. Just that eerie calm that descends when you finally shut the door on something that's been leaking poison into your life. She wasn't lashing out. She wasn't even angry anymore. She was done. They'd made her invisible. She returned the favor, erasing only the pieces that tethered her to their chaos. She didn't torch the house. She simply rewired the exits. Let them wander the halls she once guarded, asking why the lights didn't turn on the way they used to. Let them open drawers that led nowhere, logs that didn't line up, permissions that refused to behave. Let them ask the question they never once bothered to ask while she was still on payroll. Wait, how did this all actually work? The time they'd start looking, she'd be long gone. By 10 o'clock a.m., the company's Slack channels were coughing up smoke. #NGOPS. Why is the IAM policy rollback failing? Did someone reassign the root ARN yesterday? Where the hell is the DR runbook repo? I can't find the commit history. #legal hold. Who last accessed the PHI endpoint logs before they went weird? Has anyone seen Camille's offboarding checklist? #it support. Backup snapshot restore stuck at 83%. ETA 4 hours. Maybe. Rebooting proxy roles now. Pray for us. Camille didn't have access anymore. She wasn't inside the house, but she could still smell the smoke. She sat at her kitchen table, eating dry cereal from a mug, watching the quiet digital meltdown unfold from the outside like a person standing just beyond the blast radius. Her personal inbox pinged. Once. Then again. First came Mark. "Hi Camille, legal had a few follow-up questions regarding your offboarding process. Could we hop on a quick call? Let me know what works for you today." Thanks, she didn't reply. Next, her old work phone buzzed. Unknown number, twice. Voicemail left, deleted without listening. Then, a name she did recognize. Brian W., Junior Cloud Engineer. 2 years in. He once stayed late to help her re-verify a failing checksum chain, even though he didn't understand half the logic. He listened, took notes, called her Miss Camille out of habit and respect. Now his message blinked on Signal. "Hey, I know you're probably busy or whatever, but did something happen this morning? Everything's kinda off, like really off. Just wondering if I missed something during turnover." She smiled, just a twitch of one cheek, like a cat watching a mouse crawl too close. She typed back, "Hi Brian. Congrats on surviving the realignment. Hope you're well. Attached is the compliance checklist I gave to legal last quarter. You'll probably need it soon." She added a zipped folder. Inside was a PDF titled, "Things That Will Break Without Me," annotated, updated. No venom, no threats, just facts. He replied 3 dots, paused then. "You always kept the receipts, huh?" "Always," she typed. At that moment, she knew the panic was only just starting. DevOps team was probably halfway through the 5th reboot cycle of the IAM policy set. Legal would be elbow deep in contradicting audit logs, trying to make sense of process drift alerts that shouldn't exist in stable systems. Marketing would be rehearsing fake smiles for next week's investor call, blissfully unaware that their new healthcare product had the structural integrity of a graham cracker raft. And Mark, poor Mark, likely just gotten off a call where someone from legal asked who approved the HIPAA architecture. Camille had once heard him say during a team lunch, "Compliance is just a checkbox, not a career." She wondered how that checkbox felt now, slippery, missing, with no paper trail in sight. She refilled her coffee, this time with a splash of the cheap whiskey she kept for weekends and funerals. The sun had fully crested the skyline now. Light spilled across the countertop like the first day of spring. They still hadn't called it a breach. They wouldn't. Not yet, but the logs were wrong. The keys didn't align, and every question they asked would pull another thread. Camille didn't need to rip the system apart. She just left the door open long enough for them to realize there's no one left who remembers how this place was held together. By 1:17 p.m., word HIPAA was trending internally like it had sprouted teeth. It started with a red flag alert in the compliance dashboard. Endpoint anomaly detected. Log inconsistency. PHI access trace incomplete. Then came a second, more damning one. Checksum mismatch on Q3 encryption validation reports. Recommend immediate audit. The system, once sleepy and unbothered, was now a shrieking child in a room full of broken glass. Eagle flipped its switch from observe to contain. Within 30 minutes, an emergency Zoom was called. VPs, compliance officers, product leads, and a DevOps manager who looked like he hadn't blinked since breakfast. Camille wasn't invited to that call, but she didn't need to be. Instead, at 2:02 p.m., she received a cold, templated email with urgent in the subject line and a legal signature block so long it could file its own taxes. Hi, Camille. Hope you're doing well. We're reviewing some post-offboarding systems behavior and would appreciate your assistance in clarifying a few items related to your prior responsibilities. Could you provide documentation related to audit protocols for endpoint logging and PHI access controls? Let us know at your earliest convenience. Thank you. She stared at the message for a moment. Then, with the stillness of a mountain before a storm, she typed, "Hi there. Please refer to archive ticket #7837 for full encryption protocol escalation, and page 6 of my offboarding checklist for access control documentation. Best of luck. Regards, Camille B." She hit send. Closed the lid of her laptop like sealing a tomb, because now the clock was ticking for them. Ticket #7837, long ignored, was timestamped and full of explicit warnings she had escalated, documented, and flagged as noncompliant months ago. Page 6 of her offboarding checklist detailed the architecture she alone maintained, every dependency, every brittle script, every temporary fix they'd decided to treat as permanent. And now, the pieces were collapsing in slow, organized failure, like dominoes wearing suits. An intern posted a question in #security chat that read, "Are we still using the same HIPAA compliance vendor as last quarter?" No one replied, because the vendor had flagged anomalies too and quietly pulled back their public endorsement. The CTO, who once told Camille we need to be lean, not compliant, was now pacing on a Zoom screen, sweat blooming under his arms as legal asked, "Was PHI data exposed? Do we need to file with HHS?" Camille poured herself a tall glass of water, hands steady, face neutral. She didn't need to smile. She was the smile. That smug, quiet grin you feel when truth arrives late to the party but still kicks in the door. She'd built every defense they had, and when they ignored her, she simply stepped aside and let their own negligence trip over its laces. The beauty of compliance is in the timestamps. The beauty of revenge is when your timestamps say, "I warned you. I documented it. You chose chaos." Now they were deep in it. No scapegoats. No deniability. Just Camille's ghost in every log file, every checklist, every closed ticket marked low priority. The Slack export hit like a shotgun blast through a Jenga tower. Legal combed through Camille's message history, expecting footnotes and cordial compliance chatter. Instead, they found time bombs, 6 distinct threads where she flagged security vulnerabilities, named the systems, included screenshots, and cited specific HIPAA subsections like she was handing them a loaded briefcase and saying, "Please diffuse." One message from April Reed: "If this PHI endpoint isn't audited properly, we're inviting federal scrutiny. This isn't theoretical, it's a breach vector. Let me know if we're prioritizing this or pretending it's a Tuesday problem." No replies. Another one, sent at 9:11 p.m. after a long day she spent rerouting misconfigured proxies. "Mark, please confirm if we're implementing the encryption protocol outlined in ticket #7837. I won't sign off on Q2 audits without it." Legal printed the thread, highlighted it, stapled it to the wall of a war room and stared at it in silence. Across the office, Mark was overheard on a call with the CTO whispering, "I didn't think she meant it," and that was when the panic tipped into freefall. Because Camille hadn't just meant it, she lived it, documented it, sent receipts to everyone short of the janitorial staff. Then came the audit log. Someone finally pulled the root key rotation history. What they saw made a junior sysadmin vomit in the break room trash can. The AWS the root key, had been recycled 2 weeks prior. Without a compliance key escrow, without Camille's sign-off, without backup logs, that alone was a HIPAA violation so loud you could hear the regulators warming up their subpoenas. The new key's metadata, incomplete. Logs, skipped. Custodian record, blank. Looked like an inside job. It wasn't. It was just negligence, plain and stupid. Legal drafted a containment memo, started prepping their self-report package, and notified cyber risk insurance. The premium was going to jump so high it'd break a nose on the way down. Camille sat on her porch, sun on her face, laptop balanced on her knees. A glass of ginger ale in one hand, her fingers hovered over one last message. She opened her email. Compliance team at her former company subject. Access logs clarification body. If you're looking for the missing log hashes, please refer to the backup redundancy report I submitted last quarter. You'll find the metadata inconsistencies start around the time you reassigned permissions without credential validation. For reference, ticket hash 7837 still has the checklist you ignored. Then she BCC'd one more address. Raina M. at Presselgernet, a tech journalist she met once at a DevSecOps conference. They'd bonded over lukewarm coffee and shared disdain for companies that treated compliance like a fashion accessory. To Raina, she added only one line: "You may want to request the SOC2 report timestamped July 11. Then she hit send, closed her laptop, and exhaled. Inside that SOC2 was a signature. Marks, certifying that encryption standards were fully implemented and monitored in production. Except they weren't. And Camille had the tickets, logs, and Slack trails to prove it. The dominoes weren't just falling now. They were screaming. By the following Monday, the company froze every line of code tied to the healthcare rollout. They issued a brief internal memo, laced with legalese and fake optimism, calling it a temporary reassessment of compliance infrastructure. Translation: been caught pants down in a hurricane, and someone's already tweeting photos. An internal investigation was launched. Camille's name came up early, often. Someone finally read her offboarding checklist and realized half their systems were strung together with her spit, tape, and uncompensated weekends. Legal sent her a formal apology. 4 paragraphs of groveling tucked into a DocuSign envelope. Final line: "We'd also like to extend a consulting opportunity, should you be open to a conversation." She laughed, once, sharp and unfiltered. She didn't reply. Instead, she turned back to the whiteboard in her new office, technically a sublet above a bike repair shop, but it had a window and didn't smell like Mark's cologne. On it, in thick red marker, was the name of her new LLC. Fail-Safe Audit Group, her first client. Healthcare startup 2 blocks from the office that just nuked her career. Her second, a legacy EMR system whose CISO remembered her from a compliance webinar and sent an email that started, "You always ask the right questions." Her third, well, they used to compete directly with her old company. Now they were hiring Camille to comb their entire stack for skeletons, and they were paying well. She didn't gloat. Didn't post passive-aggressive LinkedIn rants, even leak the SOC2 report Raina handled that just fine on her own front page, full breakdown, quotes from 3 unnamed sources. Camille just worked, methodically, cleanly, and when clients asked what set her firm apart, she'd point to the tagline on her new website: "Redundancy is a feature, not a flaw," because some systems don't need to burn down. Some just need the right person to stop holding them up. You know what sticks with me? Camille didn't torch anything. She just let their own arrogance do the job. This story's a masterclass in knowing your worth, documenting everything, and letting the receipts speak louder than rage. Honestly, that's the kind of revenge HR can't redact. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.